Gilgo Beach is a tragic place in its own way. Despite all its beauty and being a place where you can see stunningly beautiful sunsets, the sands of this beach hold many secrets. Back in the distant 1990s, a maniac began to operate there. And only now, in 2026, is this case reaching its conclusion. The Gilgo Beach serial killings refer to a series of murders that took place on Long Island, New York, between 1993 and 2010. The case drew nationwide attention in late 2010 and 2011 when police searching for missing Shanann Gilbert discovered the remains of 10 victims along Ocean Parkway, near Gilgo Beach, as well as in the surrounding areas of Suffolk and Nassau counties. 4 victims, Melissa Barthelemy, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Megan Waterman, and Amber Lynn Costello, were found in December 2010 in close proximity to each other and became known as the Gilgo Four. Another 6 bodies were discovered in March and April of 2011, some of which were later linked to previously unsolved cases. Rex Heuermann was not just a serial killer, he was a true sadist. He tormented his victims and even called the relatives of his victims. When FBI psychologists begin to analyze his personality, they will realize they are facing one of the most dangerous criminals of our time. But let's go back to the very beginning of Rex's criminal path to understand why he tormented other people so cruelly. Watch until the end. That's where the most interesting part is. Gilbert's disappearance in May 2010 prompted the search, although the cause of her death remains disputed and is not definitively connected to the other victims. Between 2023 and 2024, Rex Heuermann, an architectural consultant from Manhattan and a resident of Massapequa Park, was charged with 7 murders, including the killing of the Gilgo Four, as well as the murders of Sandra Castilla, Valerie Mack, and Jessica Taylor. In April 2026, Heuermann pleaded guilty to 7 murders and admitted to an 8th, the murder of Karen Brigada. Rex Andrew Heuermann was born on September 13, 1963, in Massapequa Park, New York, a village on the south shore of Long Island, to Theodore and Dolores Heuermann. Rex's childhood acquaintances remembered him as a mama's boy who was extremely close to his mother, whom they described as domineering. His father, a World War II veteran and former second lieutenant in the U.S. Air Force, passed away in 1975 when Heuermann was 12 years old. In 1994, Heuermann bought the house he grew up in from his mother for $170,000 and continued living there until his arrest in 2023. Neighbors noted that over the years, the house had fallen further into disrepair compared to the more upscale homes nearby. Heuermann graduated in 1981 from Berner High School in Massapequa Park, where one of his classmates was actor William Baldwin. He studied architecture at the New York Institute of Technology and by 1987 was working at an architecture firm in Manhattan. Rex married his first wife on September 29, 1990, in New Brunswick, New Jersey. The marriage ended in divorce in 1994. In April 1996, he married his second wife, Asa Ellerup. Before his arrest, he lived with her and their 2 children. Ellerup filed for divorce in 2023. Authorities began considering Heuermann as a suspect in March 2022 after determining that a dark green first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche registered in his name matched the vehicle described by a witness to one of the murders. Investigators stated that records from Heuermann's cell phone showed contacts with 3 of the 4 victims, and a mailbox associated with him was used to search for information about the investigation. Court documents also indicate that he searched online for sadistic materials, videos involving children, you know what kind, and images of the victims and their relatives. DNA analysis showed a potential match between DNA taken from a discarded pizza crust and DNA found on hairs collected from the burlap used to wrap one of the victims. A potential match was also found with Heuermann's wife when comparing hairs found on or near 3 of the victims to samples taken from bottles discovered in the trash near Heuermann's home. Investigators stated that Rex's wife and children were out of state during each of the periods when the murders are believed to have occurred. Yes, Rex remained elusive for a long time, but was caught thanks to a witness who identified his car. Rex was hardly some criminal mastermind, but it's absolutely clear that his psychopathic traits allowed him to hide for so long, though he probably didn't even realize it. On July 13th, 2023, Heuermann was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of second-degree murder in connection with the deaths of Melissa Bartholomew, 24, Megan Waterman, 22, and Amber Costello, 27. On June 6, 2024, Heuermann was indicted and charged with the murders of Jessica Taylor, 20 years old, and Sandra Castillo, 28 years old. Castillo's murder had not previously been linked to the Gilgo Beach serial killings. This development extended the timeline of the case back to the early 1990s, much earlier than investigators had previously believed. In January 2024, Heuermann was charged with the murder of 25-year-old Maureen Brainerd Barnes, who disappeared in 2007. On April 8, 2026, Heuermann pleaded guilty to the 7 murders he was charged with and admitted to committing an 8th murder. Sentencing is scheduled for June 17, 2026. And now I will briefly tell you about all of his victims. I won't go into details like the height and weight of the victims, so as not to drag out this video. I will only provide you with introductory data that will help you understand why Rex operated in a certain place and with a specific goal. And you will also understand the criteria by which he chose his victims. Sandra Castillo, a 28-year-old woman from Trinidad and Tobago, was killed on November 19th or 20th, 1993. In December 2024, 31 years after her death, Heuermann was charged with her murder. DNA extracted from hairs found on her body matched Heuermann's DNA. At the time of her disappearance, Castillo was living in New York. Her body was discovered in November 1993 by hunters in a wooded area in North Sea, Long Island, about 60 miles northeast of Gilgo Beach. She is the earliest known victim included in the murder charges against Heuermann, suggesting that he began killing in the 1990s or earlier, and that he disposed of bodies in locations outside the Gilgo Beach area. Maureen Brainerd Barnes from Norwich, Connecticut, was 25 years old when she disappeared. She was last seen on July 9th, 2007, when she said she planned to spend a day in New York City. No one saw her again. Brainerd Barnes worked as a seasonal telemarketer and turned to sex work when she couldn't find a job. A mother of 2, she posted ads for her services on Craigslist to pay her mortgage. She hadn't worked in that industry for 7 months, but returned to it after receiving an eviction notice. Her body was found in December 2010. She was bound with 3 leather belts, and DNA found on one of the belts matched the DNA of Heuermann's wife. Melissa Bartholomew, 24 years old, from Erie County, New York, disappeared on July 12, 2009. She lived in the Bronx and worked in the escort business through Craigslist. It is known that she used the alias Chloe. On the night she disappeared, she met with a client, deposited $900 into her bank account, and tried to call her ex-boyfriend, but couldn't reach him. Starting a week later and over the course of 5 weeks, her 15-year-old sister received a series of vulgar, mocking, and abusive calls from a man, possibly the killer, using Bartholomew's phone. The caller would ask if she was doing the same kind of work as her sister. The calls escalated and ended with the caller telling her sister that Bartholomew was dead and that he was going to watch her rot. The police traced some of the calls, but were unable to identify the caller. Bartholomew's mother noted that during her daughter's disappearance, there were many calls from her phone to Manorville. 22-year-old Megan Waterman from Scarborough, Maine, went missing on June 6, 2010, after posting ads for escort services on Craigslist. The day before, she told her boyfriend that she was going out and would call him later. At the time, she was staying at a motel in Hauppauge, New York, 15 miles northeast of Gilgo Beach. Waterman was reported missing on June 8, 2010, after she failed to contact her 3-year-old daughter, whom she had left with relatives. Her body was found in December 2010. On March 29th and April 4th, 2011, 4 more sets of remains were discovered. All of them were found in a different area, off the parkway, near Oak Beach and Gilgo Beach, within 2 miles east of where the remains were found in December 2010. These victims were Jessica Taylor, Valerie Mack, Tanya Jackson, and Jackson's daughter, Tatiana Dykes. The Suffolk County Police Department later expanded the search area to the Nassau County border in an effort to find other victims. Mack was only identified in 2020, and Jackson and Dykes were not identified until 2024. 2 more sets of remains were found on April 11, 2011, after the search was expanded into Nassau County. They were located about a mile apart from each other and roughly 5 miles west of the remains discovered in December. One set belonged to a victim with XY chromosomes who may have been a cross-dresser or a transgender woman. Police referred to this victim as Asian Doe, based on forensic evidence indicating Asian descent. Investigators estimated that the victim had been dead for 5 to 10 years. The other set of remains belonged to Jane Doe number 7, partial remains that had been found on Fire Island in 1996. Jane Doe number 7 was identified as Karen Vergata in 2023. Valerie Mack, 24 years old, also known as Melissa Taylor, lived in Philadelphia and was working as an escort when she disappeared in 2000. She had a young son. Partial remains of Mack were found in Manorville, New York on November 19, 2000, but were only identified in 2020. On May 28, 2020, police announced that the remains had been identified as Valerie Mack, who was last seen by family members in the spring or summer of 2000 in the Port Republic area of New Jersey. On December 17, 2024, the Suffolk County District Attorney charged Heuermann with the murder of Mack. Jessica Taylor, 20 years old, was living in Manhattan when she went missing on July 21, 2003. On July 26th, her torso was found 45 miles east of Gilgo Beach in Manorville, New York, and later that same year was identified through DNA analysis. Her torso was found on top of a pile of wood debris at the end of a paved driveway off Halsey Manor Road, just north of the Long Island Expressway. A sheet of plastic was found underneath the torso, and a tattoo on her body had been damaged with a sharp object. Additional remains found on March 29, 2011, including a skull, hands, and forearm, were identified as belonging to Taylor. Karen Vergata, a 34-year-old woman from Manhattan, is believed to have been working in the sex industry when she disappeared in 1996. She was last seen around February 14, 1996, and her disappearance was never reported. Remaining unidentified for 27 years, she was known as Jane Doe number 7 and the Fire Island Jane Doe until she was identified through genetic genealogy in 2023. Tanya Dennis Jackson, born in Alabama on October 22, 1970, was a U.S. Army veteran who was living in Brooklyn in 1997 when she disappeared along with her 2-year-old daughter, Tatiana Marie Dykes. Partial remains of Jackson were discovered in Lakeview, New York in 1997. Additional remains were found in Jones Beach State Park in 2011, along with Dykes' remains. Unidentified for 28 years, Jackson and Dykes were identified in early 2025. In December 2025, Tatiana Dykes' father, Andrew, was arrested and charged with the murders of Jackson and their daughter. Police no longer believe these deaths are connected to the Long Island serial killings. It is absolutely obvious that Rex had certain preferences regarding his victims. First of all the girls worked in the sex industry. Secondly, their height and weight were quite small. And thirdly, they were all relatively young, from which we can conclude that he was interested in young, thin escort workers. I don't rule out that it was some kind of fetish. Again, we shouldn't forget that Rex called the relatives of his victims to find out if they were doing the same thing as his victims. From this, one can draw the absolutely obvious conclusion that he was interested in girls from the sex industry. On May 1st, 2010, 24-year-old Shanann Gilbert, who worked as an escort model, was at work at a client's house in the gated community of Oak Beach on Jones Beach Island in Suffolk County. At 4:51 a.m., Gilbert called 911 from the property of her client, Joseph Brewer, and told the dispatcher that someone was chasing her and that they were trying to kill her, but she did not give her location. She ran to a neighboring house where she was let in, but fled when she was asked to wait for the police. She was last seen shortly after that when she knocked on the front door of another house and screamed for help before running off into the night. In December 2011, 19 months after she disappeared, Gilbert's remains were found in a marsh between Oak Beach and Ocean Parkway, about half a mile from where she was last seen. The cause of her death remains disputed. In May 2012, Suffolk County medical examiners ruled that Gilbert accidentally drowned after entering the marsh. However, the official autopsy report lists the cause of death as undetermined. Gilbert's mother, Mari Gilbert, who has since passed away, publicly claimed that her daughter was murdered by a serial killer and criticized the police for failing to identify the perpetrator. Due to the controversy surrounding Gilbert's death, in September 2014, forensic pathologist Michael Baden agreed to conduct an independent autopsy of Gilbert's remains in hopes of determining the exact cause of death. Upon examining Gilbert's remains, Baden found damage to the hyoid bone, which indicated possible strangulation. Baden also noted that the body was found lying face up, which is unusual for drowning victims. Despite this, her death is still officially listed as an accident. On May 6, 2020, the New York State Supreme Court ordered the Suffolk County Police to release the recording of Gilbert's 911 call, rejecting the request to keep it confidential after more than 10 years. On May 13, 2022, the Suffolk County Police Department released the 911 call recording. According to a 2011 article in the New York Times, the perpetrator was most likely a white male between the ages of 25 and 45, well acquainted with the South Shore of Long Island, and with access to burlap sacks that were used to store the bodies before disposal. Investigators have put forward various theories about whether there might be more than one killer. Next, the FBI got involved in this investigation. And that's not for nothing. In essence, Rex remained elusive for about 30 years. He began his criminal path in the 1990s, and charges were only brought against him in 2023. Who knows how many victims are actually on his record, since he remained free all this time. And by the way, Wikipedia says that the number of his victims is 11 or more. Consequently, this number might vary. On December 10, 2015, Suffolk County Police Commissioner Tim Sini announced that the FBI had officially joined the investigation. The announcement came the day after former police chief James Burke was charged with civil rights violations and conspiracy. It was reported that Burke, who retired from the department in October 2015, had for years blocked the FBI from participating in investigations related to Gilgo Beach. The FBI had previously assisted in the search for victims, but had never officially taken part in the investigation. In November 2016, Burke was sentenced to 46 months in federal prison for assault and conspiracy. For many years, the investigation was hampered by significant interagency friction and a refusal by law enforcement agencies to cooperate. On September 12, 2017, Suffolk County District Attorney Robert Biancavilla stated that John Bittroff, a Suffolk County resident convicted of murdering 2 sex workers and suspected in the murder of a third, may have committed some of the Gilgo Beach murders. Biancavilla stated that Bittroff was likely involved in the deaths of 2 women, and that there are similarities between the crime scenes at Gilgo Beach and the known murders for which Bittroff was convicted in May 2017 and sentenced in September of the same year. Bittroff was arrested in 2014 after his DNA was found on the bodies of 2 murder victims, Rita Tungrady and Colleen McNamee, whose bodies were discovered in 1993 and 1994 respectively. The match was made using DNA provided by his brother, who had been convicted in a separate case in 2013. In May 2017, Bittroff was found guilty of these murders, and in September, he was sentenced to consecutive prison terms of 25 years for each murder. The Suffolk County Police did not comment on the prosecutor's statement due to the ongoing investigation into the Gilgo Beach murders. Bittroff's attorney rejected the prosecutor's claims. Bittroff lived in Manorville, where the torsos of Gilgo Beach victims Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack were found. Rita Tangrady's adult daughter was also the best friend of Melissa Bartholomew, one of the Gilgo Beach victims. On January 16, 2020, Suffolk County Police Commissioner Geraldine Hart released an image of a belt found at the crime scene, with the letters HM or WH, depending on the orientation of the belt, embossed on black leather. The belt was found during the initial investigation near Ocean Parkway in Gilgo Beach. Police believe that the belt was in the perpetrator's possession and did not belong to any of the victims. Police have revealed few details about the evidentiary value of the belt and have refused to comment on exactly where it was found. It was also announced that new scientific evidence is being used in the investigation, and that a website has been launched to allow the department to share updates and receive information related to the case. However, the website was later taken down. On April 8, 2026, Heuermann pleaded guilty to the 7 murders he had been charged with. He also admitted to killing Karen Vergata, a crime he had not previously been charged with. Interestingly, the trial for Rex's case hasn't happened yet, and the hearing is set for June 17th, 2026. It's absolutely clear to everyone that he's facing the electric chair, or, at best, life in prison. But before passing what seems like an obvious sentence, we need to confirm the number of victims. And, as you recall, there could be even more of them. We'll wait for the trial. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next part of this video. That's all for today. And bye everyone!